If you think California house prices have finished falling, you need to watch this entire video, because what's coming over the next 18 months is going to catch millions of homeowners completely off guard. And by the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late to do anything about it. The drops we've seen so far, that's just the beginning. And I'm going to show you exactly why prices are about to fall even further, who's going to be affected the most, and what you absolutely need to do right now to protect yourself. Write in the comments, "Protect my California home," if you're worried about what's coming for property values. Here's what most people are telling themselves right now. Okay, prices dipped a bit. Interest rates are coming down. The worst is over. Things will stabilize from here. And I get it. That's what you want to believe. That's what the headlines are suggesting. But here's the problem. The data is screaming something completely different. And if you're not paying attention to the right signals, you're about to get absolutely blindsided. Let me start with the most important number that nobody's talking about. Right now, there are currently 2.1 million California homeowners sitting on fixed-rate mortgage deals that are going to expire between now and the end of 2026. 2.1 million. These are people who locked in rates at 2.3%, maybe 2.6%, back when the Federal Reserve was practically giving money away. They've been living comfortably, making their monthly payments without breaking a sweat. But here's what's about to happen to them. When those deals expire and they go to refinance, they're looking at rates of 5.75% to 6.5%, maybe higher depending on their circumstances. That's not a small increase. That's a financial earthquake for most California families. Let me make this brutally real with actual numbers you can understand. If you borrowed $500,000 at 2.3%, your monthly payment sits around $2,090. Totally manageable for most Bay Area households earning a combined $120,000 to $140,000 a year. But when that deal expires and you refinance at 5.75%, that same mortgage suddenly costs you $2,920 per month. That's an extra $830 every single month. Over $9,960 a year that just vanished from your household budget. Now some families can absorb that hit. They cut back on everything, stop taking vacations, cancel subscriptions, eliminate dining out completely. It's painful, but survivable. Stay right here, because what I'm about to reveal next shows you exactly why hundreds of thousands of California families have zero escape options. But here's the thing. A huge portion of these 2.1 million California homeowners can't absorb it. They bought at the absolute peak of the marketplace in 2021 or 2022 when valuations were at their highest. They stretched every penny they had to afford the down payment and the mortgage payments. They were banking on rates staying low and their property value increasing to build equity. Neither of those things happened. So what happens when hundreds of thousands of these homeowners realize they genuinely can't afford their new mortgage payments? They have exactly three options. Option 1, somehow find an extra $800 to $1,000 per month in their budget, which for most California families is borderline impossible. With grocery prices up 30%, utility bills doubled, property taxes climbing, everything costing more. Option 2, stay on their lender's standard variable rate and hope for the best. But here's the problem with that. Standard variable rates right now are sitting around 7.5% to 8.75%. At 7.5%, that $500,000 mortgage is costing you $3,490 per month. You've gone from paying $2,090 to nearly $3,500. That's an extra $1,400 every single month. That's $16,800 a year. Nobody can just magically find an extra $17,000 in their annual budget. Which leaves option 3, sell. Sell before you're forced into default, before your credit rating gets destroyed, before you lose all your equity in a foreclosure. Sell while you still have some control over the situation. And this is exactly what's starting to happen right now. We're already seeing inventory increase dramatically across California, especially in areas where valuations were inflated the most during the pandemic buying hysteria. But here's where things get really interesting. This wave of forced sellers is hitting the marketplace at the exact same time that buyer demand is collapsing. And when supply goes up while demand goes down, there's only one possible outcome. Prices fall. It's basic economics. Don't you dare click away, because what comes next exposes the second wave of sellers that nobody saw coming. But it's not just homeowners coming off fixed rates who are flooding the marketplace. There's a second group of sellers that's adding even more pressure, time 0.5s, and they're moving faster than anyone expected. Tech workers and high earners facing layoffs. Since the start of 2024, there's been a 32% surge in Bay Area homeowners either downsizing or selling their properties completely following job losses or income reductions. Now, some of this is natural. People change jobs. They relocate for new opportunities. That makes perfect sense. But the majority of this selling isn't about career mobility. It's about survival. Tech sector layoffs that started in 2023 haven't stopped. They've accelerated. Meta, Google, Amazon, Apple, startups across Silicon Valley, they're all cutting deeper. Workers who were earning $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 packages suddenly find themselves with zero income and mortgage payments they can't possibly cover. These aren't struggling families. These were wealthy tech professionals who thought they were financially secure. And now they're panic selling. Fear of extended unemployment in a brutal job market. Fear that their severance packages won't last long enough. Fear that the tech industry won't recover the way it used to. With all the uncertainty around AI replacing jobs and companies staying lean permanently, high-earning tech workers aren't taking any chances. They're selling now, liquidating before their savings run out, moving to lower-cost states before they're forced to sell from an even worse position. This is creating a massive amount of additional Bay Area inventory that wouldn't normally be on the marketplace. Million-dollar homes that were occupied by stable high earners are hitting the open marketplace. Properties that should have stayed off market for another decade are being listed at prices nobody expected. And every single one of those listings is adding to an already oversupplied marketplace that's struggling to absorb everything being thrown at it. Keep your eyes locked here, because what I'm about to expose next reveals the third wave that's going to devastate California property values. But here's the group that's having the single biggest impact on the California market right now, and it's the one most people don't fully appreciate: out-of-state investors and speculators. And they're not just selling a few properties here and there. They're exiting California in absolutely staggering numbers. 40% of all investor-owned properties in California have either already been sold or are actively being listed right now. 40% gone. Let that sink in for a second. The entire investor class that was driving California valuations skyward is being dismantled in real time. And it's happening for one very simple reason. The economics don't work anymore. Mortgage rates for investors have more than doubled. Investment mortgages that were 3% or 3.5% are now 6.5% to 7%. The rental income that used to comfortably cover the mortgage and leave decent profit is now barely covering the mortgage payment, if it's covering it at all. But it's not just about interest rates. California's expanded tenant protection laws that went into effect have fundamentally changed the entire landlord-tenant relationship in this state. Just cause eviction requirements, completely transforming the game. Now landlords can only evict under very specific legal grounds. And even then, they need to provide extended notice periods. Tenants get protected periods where the landlord can't reclaim the property at all. Every tenancy automatically becomes indefinite. No more fixed terms that give landlords control. Landlords face fines of tens of thousands of dollars for violations. They have to meet stricter standards, navigate complex compliance requirements, allow emotional support animals with virtually no ability to refuse, The compliance burden is absolutely massive. The costs keep mounting relentlessly, and the control that landlords used to have over their own California properties has completely evaporated. For professional institutional investors with massive portfolios and dedicated legal teams, this is manageable. It's just cost of doing business. But for the out-of-state investor who owns 2 or 3 California properties, this is a nightmare they never signed up for. So they're selling, and when investors sell, those properties hit the regular sales marketplace. They're not being replaced with new rental inventory. They're being bought by owner-occupiers, by families, by first-time buyers, which sounds great in theory. More people getting on the property ladder. But here's the problem. All those sales are happening simultaneously, flooding the marketplace with inventory, pushing valuations downward with every transaction. Stay locked in because what comes next shows you exactly which California regions are about to see the most catastrophic price crashes. An investor who's desperate to liquidate because they can't handle California's regulations anymore isn't going to hold out for top dollar. They're going to accept a lower offer just to exit. And every below-market sale sets a new price benchmark for the area. The next seller has to go lower to compete, then the next, then the next. It's a downward spiral that feeds on itself. Now here's what makes all of this even worse. These 3 groups, homeowners coming off fixed rates, tech workers facing layoffs, and investors exiting California, they're not spread evenly across the state. They're concentrated in specific regions. And those regions are about to see the most dramatic valuation collapses. The Bay Area and coastal California are getting hit the hardest. Inventory in San Francisco is up nearly 28% compared to last year, but sales volumes are down 34%. That means there are way more properties for sale, but way fewer people actually buying them. Sellers are sitting there watching their listings get 0 interest, 0 showings, 0 offers. And the only way to get any traction is to drop the valuation. We're seeing an average of 47% of all properties that eventually sell having at least one price reduction before they close. In some parts of the Bay Area, that number exceeds 60%. Properties that were confidently listed at one point, $2 million 8 months ago, are now quietly reduced to $1.1 million, then $1 million, then $950,000, and still not selling. The areas that saw the biggest valuation increases during the pandemic are now seeing the biggest corrections. Bay Area suburbs that became massively popular during remote work are now seeing demand crater as companies force return to office mandates. Properties that sold for $900,000 in 2021 are now struggling to get $700,000. That's a 22% drop in nominal terms. But when you factor in inflation running over 12% cumulative, the real value loss is closer to 35%. People who bought at the peak are now staring at devastating negative equity. They owe more on their mortgage than their property is actually worth. Don't go anywhere, because what I'm about to reveal next shows you why buyer confidence has completely collapsed and what that means for prices. And if they're one of those homeowners coming off a cheap fixed-rate deal, they're in an absolutely catastrophic position. They can't afford the new mortgage payment. But they also can't sell without taking a massive loss and still owing money to the bank. But here's what's really going to accelerate the valuation drops over the next 18 months. Nobody's buying. Buyer confidence is at multi-year lows right now. Despite everyone expecting interest rates to fall quickly, they haven't. The Federal Reserve has been incredibly cautious about cutting rates because inflation keeps proving more stubborn than expected. Every time there's discussion of a rate cut, inflation data comes in hotter than anticipated, and the Fed holds steady. Mortgage rates have come down slightly from their absolute peak, sure, but they're still sitting around 5.75% to 6% for most California buyers. That's nowhere near the 2.5% to 3% rates that buyers were getting just a few years ago. And buyers are doing the math. They're realizing that even with house valuations coming down slightly, their monthly mortgage payment would still be significantly higher than what they'd pay in rent, so they're choosing to wait. They're sitting on the sidelines watching valuations drift downward and thinking, why would I buy now when prices might be even lower in 6 months? This creates a vicious cycle. Buyers wait because they expect prices to fall further. But their waiting means fewer transactions, which means less demand, which actually causes prices to fall further, which validates their decision to wait. And around it goes. Transaction volumes have collapsed in certain California markets by over 58% compared to the same period last year. That's not a slow marketplace. That's a marketplace that's essentially frozen solid. And when a marketplace freezes like this, when buyers and sellers are completely paralyzed by uncertainty, the only thing that breaks the stalemate is capitulation. Sellers have to blink first. They have no choice. Mortgage payments don't stop needing to be made. Property taxes still come due. Life events still happen. People still need to relocate for work, for family, for countless different reasons. So sellers start accepting lower and lower offers just to get a deal completed. And once that starts happening in volume, valuations accelerate downward fast. Keep watching, because what comes next exposes why first-time buyers still can't afford to enter the market despite falling prices. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but what about first-time buyers? Won't they jump in and support the California market? Here's the problem. First-time buyers are even more sensitive to interest rates than anyone else because they're borrowing the maximum amount they can possibly qualify for. When rates are at 6%, the amount a first-time buyer can borrow shrinks dramatically compared to when rates were at 2.5%. A couple earning a combined $100,000 could borrow around $450,000 at 2.5% interest. At 6%, that drops to maybe $360,000. That's a $90,000 reduction in buying power. So even though California house prices are coming down, first-time buyers can't actually afford to purchase any more property than they could before, because their mortgage capacity has shrunk. They're still stuck, still priced out, still renting. And that means they're not providing the demand support that the California marketplace desperately needs right now. The First-Time Homebuyer Assistance Program. Hangover is making things worse too. Tens of thousands of people who bought properties using California assistance programs between 2016 and 2023 are now realizing their homes haven't appreciated the way they thought they would. Some are actually worth less than what they paid. Developers and sellers added premiums because they knew buyers were using government help. That premium, usually 12% to 18% above market value, has completely disappeared. So you've got people who bought a home for $600,000 in 2019, paid their mortgage diligently for 6 years, and now when they go to refinance or try to sell, they find out it's only worth $540,000. They've lost money despite making payments for 6 years. That's absolutely devastating. And it's creating another wave of forced sellers who have no choice but to take a loss just to move forward with their lives. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share next reveals what experts are privately saying about how much further California prices need to fall. Here's what the experts are quietly saying behind closed doors, even though they won't say it publicly. California house prices need to fall by another 15% to 20% in real terms over the next 2 years just to restore any semblance of affordability. Wages have been growing at around 4% to 5% annually, which is decent. But California house prices are still so far out of reach for average earners that even with recent drops, the affordability gap is still enormous. The median house price in California is currently around $780,000. The median household income is about $85,000. That's a price-to-earnings ratio of over 9 times. Historically, anything above 5 times is considered unaffordable. We're sitting at 9. In the Bay Area, it's closer to 14 times. That's completely unsustainable. Something has to give. And what's going to give is valuations. They have to come down. There's simply no other way to make the math work. But here's the really uncomfortable truth that nobody in Sacramento wants to acknowledge. If valuations fall by another 15% to 20%, from here, millions of California homeowners are going to be underwater on their mortgages. People who bought in 2021 and 2022 at the absolute peak are already close to negative equity. Another 15% to 20% drop puts them firmly in the red. They'll owe more than their house is worth. And if they're also facing higher mortgage payments because their fixed rate is expiring, they're trapped. Can't afford to stay. Can't afford to sell. Can't refinance because the property doesn't appraise high enough. It's a genuine disaster waiting to happen for hundreds of thousands of California families, and the state government can't really do anything about it without making inflation worse or causing other parts of the economy to break. Don't click away, because what comes next shows you the three waves hitting simultaneously and the exact timeline of the collapse. So where does all this leave us? Here's what's going to happen over the next 18 months. Wave 1 is already happening. Forced sellers from expired fixed-rate mortgages are listing their properties. Inventory is increasing month after month. Wave 2 is ramping up right now. Tech workers and high earners facing layoffs are accelerating their sales as severance packages run out and job markets stay brutal. Wave 3 is in full swing. Out-of-state investors are liquidating California assets ahead of further regulatory changes and continued economic deterioration. All three waves are hitting simultaneously, creating a tsunami of inventory that the California marketplace simply cannot absorb at current valuations. Buyer demand remains suppressed because of high interest rates and demolished confidence. Transaction volumes stay depressed. Sellers get desperate. Valuations fall further. And the cycle continues accelerating. The Federal Reserve isn't going to ride to the rescue either. They're far more worried about inflation staying elevated than they are about California house prices falling. If anything, they see California price corrections as a necessary adjustment to restore affordability. So don't expect emergency rate cuts to save the housing marketplace. It's not happening. The California government could intervene with new programs or support initiatives, but every time they've done that in the past, it's just inflated valuations further and made the underlying affordability problem worse. They're trapped too. If they support the market, they make houses even less affordable for young Californians. If they let it fall, millions of homeowners lose wealth and confidence collapses. There's no good option, so they're probably going to do nothing and just let market forces play out. Regional variations are going to become even more extreme. The Central Valley and Inland Empire might see valuations hold relatively steady, or even grow slightly in affordable areas, where demand remains strong. But the Bay Area and coastal California are going to see the most significant drops. Properties above $1 million are going to struggle the most. The higher you go in valuation, the worse the drops will be. Luxury properties, second homes, investment properties, those are going to get absolutely hammered. We could easily see 25% to 35% drops in some high-end Bay Area neighborhoods. Meanwhile, a 3-bedroom home in Fresno might only drop 5% to 8%, or possibly even increase slightly if local demand holds up. Stay locked in, because what comes next gives you exactly what you need to do right now to protect yourself. So what do you actually need to do about all this? If you're a California homeowner with no plans to move and your mortgage is affordable, honestly, you can ignore most of this. Your paper value might drop, but if you're not selling, it doesn't really matter. Just write it out. If you're coming off a fixed rate in the next 12 months, talk to a mortgage broker right now. Not in 6 months, when you're panicking. Right now. Understand what rates you'll qualify for. Calculate whether you can actually afford it. And if the answer is no, if you genuinely can't make the numbers work, then you need to seriously consider selling now while you still have equity. Don't wait until you're forced to sell from a much worse position, If you're trying to buy in California, the message is simple. Be patient. Don't rush. Don't panic buy because you think you're missing out. Valuations are going to keep drifting lower. There's no rush. Wait for sellers to get desperate. Make low offers. See what happens. The marketplace is turning in favor of buyers for the first time in years. Use that to your advantage. If you're renting and you're trying to decide whether to buy, run the actual numbers for your specific situation. Don't buy just because you feel like you should. Buy because the math genuinely makes sense. Compare your monthly rent to what your mortgage payment would be at current rates. Factor in maintenance, insurance, property taxes, all the hidden costs of California ownership. If buying is still more expensive than renting, and you're not planning to stay in the same place for at least 7 to 10 years, then renting might actually be the smarter financial move right now. The next 18 months are going to be absolutely critical for California housing. The decisions being made right now by homeowners, by buyers, by the Federal Reserve, by Sacramento, those decisions are going to determine what the marketplace looks like for the next decade. This isn't just a temporary blip. This is a structural adjustment, a fundamental repricing of California property relative to incomes and interest rates. And most people have no idea it's happening, because the headlines keep saying everything's fine. But you know better now. You've seen the data. You understand the forces at work. You know what's coming. And that means you can make informed decisions instead of just reacting when it's too late. The California house price drops we've seen so far, that was just the warm-up. The real drops are coming, and they're coming faster than most people think. Hit that like button if this video opened your eyes to what's really about to happen in California. Comment below with California Crisis if you're concerned about where property values are heading. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next investigation as we track this story. Share this with at least 3 people who own or rent in California, because they need to know what's coming. Knowledge is power, and right now, you have information that millions of Californians don't. Use it wisely.